welcome to the Through the Whistle podcast. I'm Ty Belcher. I'll be your one and only host for the time being. In the next coming weeks, we'll probably be joined by three other guys as we try to figure out some logistical things, as we're all three of the four of us are coming from different locations, trying to juggle how to have all four of us on the podcast at the same time. But a little introduction about myself. Played a couple seasons of college football at D3 Heidelberg University. Hopefully, I'll be back on the football field in the coming spring at Kent State. And with that being said, I feel like that's enough about me. I'll get in more about who I like team-wise. I'll try my best to keep my biases from showing, because I'll try to keep it straight down the middle. Try to give you guys as much unbiased content as possible, even though in the coming month or so, it's going to be pretty hard, especially come the end of November. But with that being said, we had a great weekend of sports, not only in the football field, but in the diamond with the Guardians and Yankees going back and forth all weekend. Game 5 tonight. Hopefully the Guardians can pull it out, pulling for the hometown team, but if not, hope for the best, But the main game from this weekend was Alabama versus Tennessee. In this game, if you were paying attention to Alabama at all this whole college football season, even if you want to go back to last season, you will see that this is not the same Nick Saban team that we've come accustomed to over the past 10, 12 years. Starting back with Mark Ingram's regime, going into A.J. McCarron, all of them. This is not the same Alabama team. Obviously, those teams are different because compared to now, they never really had that stable quarterback that we've seen the last, I'll say about 3 years with Tua to Mac to Bryce. Bryce Young's looked amazing, top 3 pick, obviously, easily top 3 pick. Personally, I would say the best quarterback in college football right now. But aside from him, this Alabama team is just not look good, honestly. Alabama's always going to have a great running back. Look very reminiscent of Alvin Kamara. Not even college Alvin Kamara, but the way he was picking apart the Vikings defense when he went for 6 touchdowns against them on Christmas Day a couple of years ago. But aside from that, this Alabama team has not looked good this whole season. We saw it early with Quinn Ewers kind of picking them up, not even kind of, but literally picking them apart week 2 in Texas before he got hurt. And then we saw it again a couple weeks ago against Texas A&M. But to Alabama's, to their credit, they were playing without their quarterback and kept A&M to less than 28 points, which I know seems like a lot, but compared to what they've done against the other 3 big schools that they played against, I know Saban would have loved to have only 28 points scored on Saturday. So let's get a little deep into this game. This is probably the only game we'll see this whole season, barring Ohio State versus Alabama, something of that nature. Well, this is going to be the only game that we see 3 of the top 4, what I think will be 3 of the top 4 picks in this upcoming April in the NFL draft playing against each other. We had Will Anderson, who's by far the best defensive player in the nation right now. And then you have Bryce Young, who's 1A, 1B guy when it comes to being a top-rated quarterback right now, who I would personally give the nod to, like I just said. And then you have Hendon Hooker, who is by far, no one will debate, has played itself into, I would say, the leading candidate for the Heisman Trophy race. And probably, if I were to say so myself, a top 3 pick, right up there with C.J. Bryce. A lot of teams in the NFL looking for quarterbacks this April, so I wouldn't be surprised if he's the 3rd quarterback taken off the board. But to go a little bit further in depth about Hendon Hooker, he's looked good all season. The receivers look great. Running back is getting 5 yards a pop every time he touches the ball. O-line giving him time back there. And Hendon's just looking great out there. Passed for over 400 yards against Alabama, which is unheard of, no matter who the quarterback was. The obvious statement, obvious history will tell you that Alabama struggles with mobile quarterbacks, and obviously Hendon Hooker is. I mean, you didn't really see him use his legs so often because he didn't need to. Number 11 for Tennessee was just picking them apart, looking like Devontae Smith from a couple years ago. At one point had, I want to say he had 6 catches for, I want to say 3 or 4 touchdowns, and Alabama just couldn't do anything against them. Every time they were throwing the ball, Tennessee was throwing the ball, it was either a penalty or a completion for 15 to 20 yards. And it was just nothing that Alabama could do. So with me bringing up the pass interferences that Alabama had, Alabama just did not look good on defense at all. They looked sloppy. They were just looking off. They had 17 penalties for 130 yards. And if you watched the game on Saturday, you saw the graphic or heard the graphic that this is the most penalties, and not just a Nick Saban team has ever had, but a Alabama school record in penalties for a single game, which is insane. 17 penalties for 130 yards. It's just inexcusable. Not disciplined, but you're taught as a DB, give up the 15 instead of giving up the 7 points. 15 yards over 7 points any day of the week. So, if you can't stop them, grab them, I guess. But Alabama just doesn't look good right now. But let me give credit to Tennessee. They played great. First half played amazing, sensational football. Made the most of every turnover that they caused. Alabama's return guy, well, not even return guy, I want to say anti-gunner, touching the ball and letting Tennessee get the ball within 30 yards of the end zone when they're already moving the ball at will, essentially. And with all that being said, this game shouldn't have been close. The game shouldn't have been close at all. It took a couple of, I don't want to say fluky plays, but very randomness, a lot of randomness, if I were to say so myself. Like Hendon Hooker and the running back not being on the same page, having a fumble, scoop and score, Alabama ties the game up. The game, if you were to watch that replay, the hole was wide open. Running back gets the ball, he's probably breaking for another 10, 15 yards. First down, keep the chains moving, stay ahead of Bama by probably go up another score at the least. Take a 14-point lead. But Bama obviously misses the field goal late in the fourth quarter. And then Hooker just methodically gets down the field, takes advantage of the first down clock stopping. And it just looked like it was easy, clockwork. Hendon Hooker threw an interception, but ended up getting reversed due to a pass interference call, which I guess you can say saved them, but at the end of the day, on the stat sheet, it's not there. And like every great quarterback, Hendon Hooker has short-term memory. He takes the ball, he comes back on the field and just takes the ball down the field, sets his kicker up to kick probably the ugliest field goal I've ever seen in my life. But he knocks it through. And that's all we're going to remember is that Tennessee won in a bloodbath 52-49 win over Alabama, which is eerily reminiscent of Big 12 football, which every non-Big 12 fan will say is horrible football, high scoring, there's no one play defense anymore. And with the Big 12 being stated, I want to say, if you were watching the Tennessee game, Tennessee looks very, very reminiscent of the old Oklahoma teams with Baker, with Kyler, even with Bryce even with Caleb Williams last year. A lot of Lane Kiffin teams scoring the ball is at will. Every possession, every time you touch the ball, you got to score, which is obviously the goal of every offense. But they were just doing it. But their defense gave up over 550 yards allowed, which is insane. And that's to an Alabama team that is not really that deep at receiver. It was mostly just Gibbs and Bryce is going back and forth and who's going to make the next play, which is kind of, I would say, the downfall of Alabama right now offensively, even though it's hard to say that there's a downfall to a team having 49 points, which is great any day of the week. Any coach, if I told Nick Saban, hey, if you guys score 49 points, do you think you're going to win the game? He's going to say, obviously. But obviously it didn't happen. So when your team is giving up over 500 yards of offense against a team that isn't really that good outside of the box, I would be nervous because you have teams out there let's say for instance Tennessee wins out and they make it to the college football playoff and they play a team like Ohio State who's loaded from wide receiver 1, wide receiver 2, slot, tight end, and then the backups, even the second wave of guys who are probably better than most of Alabama's receivers, the backups, because the starters are for sure better. Marvin Harrison, Emeka Egbuka, and then we all know Jackson Smith is probably the best receiver in college football right now. It just makes you wonder, if you find a team like Ohio State, you play a team like Ohio State, who's obviously better, who we've seen be dominant on both sides of the ball, who probably has a better defense than Alabama, if their defense gets stops against Tennessee, what are you going to do? Because CJ is just going to sit back there and pick you apart. You know, Emeka's going to get his, Marvin's going to get his, and Jackson's always going to get his. He's going to get his numbers. He's going to get about 10 catches regardless. What are you going to do? They have not that long to kind of tighten up before Georgia in a couple weeks in Athens. So if Tennessee beats Georgia, I don't see them not making it to the college football playoff, even if they play Alabama again in Georgia for the SEC championship game. So I'm gonna end it off on Alabama and their way what this means for them coming back in the college football playoff. Alabama's only number 6. I want to say number 6 right now. They didn't drop that much. They literally control their own destiny. You make it to the SEC championship game, you beat either Tennessee or Georgia, you're going to be right there in the top 4 again. I think even if they beat Georgia and it's between them and Tennessee, they're going to get the nod over Tennessee because they're going to demonstrate to the committee that they have came a long way, more than likely, since the Tennessee loss. And with that being said, Alabama has a lot to play for. They kind of got out of their way, the little de facto loss that they are allowed to take every year. And it's just like, they're going to make it back. If they can just win out, handle business the rest of the way, see the wide receivers can get it going a little bit more, see the defense can lock in, they're going to be back in the college football playoffs. So this loss, like, essentially doesn't mean anything to them. So with all that being said, we're going to hit a break real quick, and we're going to jump right into USC, Utah, as well as Clemson, Florida. Welcome back from break through the Whistle Podcast, once again coming to you live from Kent State. And let's get right into USC, Utah, which is the nightcap that you can say that no one was really expecting due to the way that both teams played. But it was a very great nightcap to a great day of college football on Saturday. So, first thing first, USC was dominating Utah in the first quarter. 21 or 28 to 7. And Bryce Young, Caleb Williams and Lincoln Riley looked like the perfect tandem that they've been the last 2 seasons. Couldn't be stopped, honestly. Utah's defense that, was supposed to be this all dominant defense just wasn't there. Not just the first half, but the whole game. Giving up 42 points to USC, despite everybody in the college football world saying that Utah has this great defense and how USC won't be able to move the ball against them because they're just so great. Like, no, this Utah team has demonstrated time and time again that they can't really get stops. UCLA moved the ball whenever they want. It kind of looked like you're playing Madden on rookie, the way that DTR was just abusing this Utah defense that was supposed to be so good. And it kind of looked like that game carried over into this game against USC, where Utah's at home, at night, blackout, having their fallen teammates on their helmet. And you would think that they would come up with more passion, want to get that taste from the UCLA game out their mouth. But they didn't. The defense gave up 42 points. Caleb Williams, for, I want to say 3/4 of the game, looked like one of the best quarterbacks in the nation, which we already know he is. But we all know what happens with Lincoln Riley teams. Lincoln Riley will put up points, but the defense will give up the points as well. This team gave up another 40 ball. Lincoln Riley and defense just do not go together. They're like oil and water. It just doesn't mix well together. And at some point, USC and Lincoln Riley, more specifically Lincoln Riley, is going to have to start focusing in more on the defensive side. Because we've seen this story way too many times. It's how many times are we going to allow him to, to just not have any defense out there? And it's just eerily reminiscent of Oklahoma football that, you can get to the party, get to the college football playoffs, all this fun stuff, but you can't play any defense. You can't stop any of these SEC teams. The 2 times that they lost, they were just blown out by SEC. Well, 2 to 3 times that they made it, they were blown out by Clemson and then by Alabama with Kyler Murray. And then the year before that against Georgia in Rose Bowl, one of the best Rose Bowls I've seen in the last probably 10 years against Georgia. And it's just like, you can't stop anybody. If you can't get stops, everybody who makes the playoffs is going to be good. It's the college football playoffs. It's the best 4 teams. Well, essentially, it's supposed to be the best 4 teams, but, we're not going to get into this SEC bias. We don't want to talk about that right now. But it's just, when are you going to fix it? You're going to the Big Ten in a couple years, and teams like Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, and Wisconsin, even though they're having a kind of a down year, they're going to have their defense ready. Their defense is going to be ready, and they're not going to be able to score the ball whenever you want. So between now, the next 1 or 2 recruiting classes, he has to put a focus on defense. You got to get people who can stop the run. And you have to get people who can pass rush, because you're going to play against great quarterbacks. Because obviously Ohio State's brought in 5-star after 5-star after 5-star quarterback, so they're obviously not going to be a problem. Now that's obviously not going to be a problem for a while at Ohio State. They're going to have to find a way in the next couple years to stop somebody, and if not, they're going to be a middle tier Big Ten team, because the Big Ten is essentially a very even team, a very evenness on both sides of the ball for the top end of the teams. So with the college football playoff essentially out the window for USC, I think even if they can find a way to beat UCLA, I don't know how the tiebreaker would work between a 3-way tiebreaker between USC, Utah, and UCLA would work. Well, this is kind of, basing it off of Oregon, who quietly snuck back into the top 10 after getting baffled by Georgia week 1. It's just, I don't really see Oregon making a comeback, but Bo Nix has been looking pretty good, and anything's possible in college football. But essentially, the Pac-12 is putting all its chips to the center of the table with UCLA and Oregon. If the loser of the Oregon-UCLA game is out, I personally believe that they'll be out. There's no way that I think the committee would put a 1-loss Pac-12 team over TCU, even they have 1 loss. Ohio State, Michigan, even they both have 1 loss, and one of them doesn't win the Big Ten championship game. I don't see them putting a Pac-12 team, even if you're the Pac-12 winner, over, I want to say, Georgia if they don't win, or Tennessee if they make it and don't win as well. And you already know the SEC champion is going to make it regardless. I don't really see the Pac-12 getting that type of leeway that we've seen with other teams. So let's carry over to another quarterback that that the whole nation has been hard on. And that's DJ Uiagalelei, who, if you follow QB1, the little series that used to come on Netflix, DJ made an appearance, great size, took a 4 or 5-star prospect's spot, like starting position, who was a senior, as a sophomore, replaced them. And we saw flashes of it in the COVID year when he played against Notre Dame and other games that season. DJ looked sensational. But then after the pandemic, 2020 season ends, it's DJ's team by himself. He looks horrible last season. He looks bad. Clemson looks bad. Can't move the ball. Just defense is carrying him. And it's like DJ and you come into this offseason, a lot of rumors, a lot of wrestlings that the freshman who came in for Clemson is going to take his spot. Kind of like how Trevor came in to Kelly Bryant's spot. But DJ's put the critics to rest. And the three big games that Clemson's played, which I would say are Wake Forest, North Carolina State, and Florida State, he's played phenomenal. He's had 12 touchdowns, 9 of those being passing touchdowns, and 0 interceptions. And I don't know what else you can ask for. You have a quarterback who's playing out of his mind. 9 passing touchdowns over 3 of your biggest games. I want to say 2 of those were on the road at that. What more can you ask from the kid? DJ's played great. Clemson's playing great. It's absolutely throttled Florida State in Tallahassee. It's just, who's stopping Clemson right now? They obviously have Syracuse coming up. Undefeated Syracuse at Clemson though. Even though they're gonna play it at noon. Instead of under the lights in Death Valley, but it's still Clemson. Clemson's going. I don't see Syracuse honestly having a chance. I think Clemson's going to cover whatever spread that Vegas comes out with, and it's not going to be pretty for Syracuse, who's honestly having a Cinderella year with their first, I want to say 7-0 start in their history, which is great. Hats off to them, their coaching staff, all of that. But I just don't see how anybody's going to stop this Clemson team, barring that they play Wake Forest again in the conference championship game, who I think Wake Forest honestly should have won. But it was Sam Hartman's second game back, and it's kind of hard going into that type of environment, playing that type of team, so early after coming back. But Clemson, no one's talked about them. They're number 4, but they by far have the best resume right now in college football. Beat Wake Forest, who I'm never going to talk about ranks, when they play. Wake Forest is currently the number 13 team. NC State, the current number 23 team. And then you got Syracuse coming up, the number 14 team. No other team in college football right now has 3 top 25 wins. With that being said, I don't know how you can say they're not a top 3 team right now based off resume and even eye test. They look great every game. I don't really remember a game where, obviously, first half of the games, they haven't always looked so hot. But they've done great every game. They've found a way to escape Wake Forest, in a very hostile environment, one of the biggest games in Wake Forest's history. And then they beat the brakes off of Florida State this past weekend. Even though Florida State's not ranked, still a great team. It's just, what can you say what can their logic be to not have, the AP's logic be for not having them as a top 3 team? You know what? We'll get deeper into the rankings a little bit later on after we get through the, creme de la creme of college football, right? Of the Big Ten. And that's Michigan absolutely trouncing the Nittany Lions. A lot of people came in thinking, hey, this is going to be Michigan's hardest test before Ohio State, especially with Michigan State not looking so hot this season. But Michigan went out there in the first half, despite it being close. You look at the numbers, the box score, you're going to see that it said 16-14, and at one point, Michigan was losing 13-14 at some point in the second quarter. But it took Penn State having the weirdest, kind of a Madden-esque pick six, take the lead, and in a Sean Clifford, out of all people, having a breakout run for about 40 or 50 yards to get them within the 5-yard line of Michigan to go in and score for their first touchdown. Because before that, Michigan had 18 first downs, which is great, honestly, which is great. Moving the ball at will, dominating time of possession, compared to Penn State's 5 first downs. 18 first downs to 5 first downs is a big gap. And then time of possession wasn't even close. I want to say it was about 24 minutes. No, not 24 minutes. It was probably about 20 minutes time of possession for Michigan compared to the Penn State's 10 minutes. And Penn State was supposed to be this advertised team. They went into Auburn, handled them. Absolutely beat the crap out of them. Same Auburn team that they won about the same margin of victory against Auburn that Georgia beat Auburn by, but Georgia was obviously at home, which playing at Auburn, Jordan Hare, way tougher than playing at home. So last Saturday, we finally see with Donovan Edwards being hurt most of the season, well, a nice chunk of the season, first couple of Big Ten games, you didn't really get to see him. They kind of slowed him in, didn't try to just throw him out there to the wolves. But Donovan played sensational. 173 yards and 2 touchdowns off of only 16 carries. You can't ask more. You can't ask anything more of that. And then you have Blake Corum back there, who is a Heisman candidate by everybody, by any means. Heisman candidate, going to be in New York, barring something crazy happening. He had 28 carries for 166 yards and 2 touchdowns as well. So when your backfield is having over, has 4 touchdowns and over 300 yards of offense, what more can you ask? And obviously we see that JJ, a lot of questions come around JJ, from outside of the Michigan fan base, but we'll get more into that later. But to go back into how dominant this Michigan game was, Michigan dominated on both sides of the ball. Offensive line looks better than they did last year, which is insane. Seeing that they had the best offensive line, voted the best offensive line in college football last season. And defensive line got pressure on Sean. Did pretty good in the back end on the wide receivers. It's just, what can you act like? What more? If I'm Jim Harbaugh, I'm a happy camper. To kind of make this metaphor into, if this was school, it was, college, that was the midterm. You had a couple quizzes early, you got Iowa, which is a kind of a big, the first big test, And then you have Maryland, who is, a quiz. I wouldn't say, I'm not going to try and downplay Maryland, but, Maryland, you didn't have everybody. You didn't have Donovan. You didn't have Eric All. You didn't have a starting guard. You didn't have a lot of people. And then you go into Indiana, where Michigan always finds a way to play a close game against them, where Mike Hart has a seizure on the sideline, and then the whole dynamic of the game shifts offensively. Run game doesn't get it going because obviously emotions are running high. But you got Penn State. That's obviously the midterm. And then after the midterm, you have the one quiz, after spring break or after fall break, or after Thanksgiving break. Well, before Thanksgiving break, which is going to be Michigan State next week. And Michigan State, they're not looking too good right now, but it's still a rivalry game. Michigan State's going to come out there, and try to keep Mel Tucker's job. You can kind of say Mel Tucker's job may or may not be on the line this week, but Michigan State just hasn't looked good. But, records go out the window, all that fun stuff that coaches always like to say. But Michigan State is going to try and come into the big house at night and punch them in their mouth, try to change the season around. And they still have a chance at a New Year's Six Bowl with, got Michigan next week and Penn State in a couple weeks after that. So Michigan State still has a lot to fight for. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's a close game. But we all know who Michigan fans believe wholeheartedly in, went to bat for multiple times last season. Georgia game, begging Jim Harbaugh to TVs to put him in. And that's JJ McCarthy. Obviously, fan base is going to be biased, but it's back to, everybody's going to act like it's like, oh no, K can never do what JJ just did. But we're going to be honest, the run game is still carrying this offense. I'm not saying that's a bad thing for JJ, because if it's not broke, don't fix it. But JJ hasn't had to carry in any of these games. And that's still going to be a big question mark. Can JJ go in there, win you the game if the run game is not going? Which is hard to believe. You have Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum both not getting yards at will like they have this whole season. And, last year was K's biggest game passing-wise was against Michigan State. And I would not be surprised if Michigan State tries to sell out and stop the run and tells J.J. McCarthy, you have to beat us. You personally have to beat us. You and these receivers of Ronnie Bell, Anthony, Cornelius Johnson, you have to use them to beat us. We're not going to let Blake get off. We're not going to let Donovan get off. So it's going to be interesting to see if JJ can actually, carry this team next week and essentially go for probably at least 250 yards and probably 2 touchdowns if Michigan wants to win this game. Throughout this show, the short show so far, kind of short, kind of long, I've been referencing the college football rankings, and I honestly think that the AP poll, made a couple mistakes. I know you can't move Tennessee up from 6 all the way up to 5. All the way up to number 1. Unheard of type of jump that we've never seen in college football in ever, without a lot of losing in betweens. But Tennessee, I think they should be at least number 2 right now. And you got Ohio State right there, and Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, Clemson, Tennessee. No, Tennessee's at 4, Clemson at 5. However it shakes out. I don't think that this is going to sound like I'm a hater, but I don't think Georgia and Ohio State should be number 1 and number 2. If anything, Ohio State, Ohio State's looked dominant the whole season. It's the old adage that you can only eat the food that's in front of you. And with that being said, Ohio State's looked good every time they've took the field against everybody. And what can you say about them not being number 1? But Georgia, they kind of looked bad against Kent State, looked horrible against Missouri. I don't care what Kirby Smart says about it being a night game at Missouri, but you're Georgia. You're a top tier team. You should be beating the brakes off of Missouri regardless. But I don't think either of those two should be number 1 or number 2. Quietly, Oregon's, jump back into the top 10, which is always going to be a good thing for Georgia at the end of the season when we're talking about resumes, especially if they lose a game or they had to be compared to Ohio State. Ohio State has no top 25 wins. No top 25 wins. If you were to, I just don't see how you can just make an argument for them being a top 2 team. I see how you make an argument, but I just don't think, by looking at the criteria, looking at the resumes, especially when you have teams like Clemson who has multiple top 25 wins. You have Michigan who just be a top 10 team. You have Tennessee who just be a top 5 team. How can you say that they could be above them? But we got a couple of weeks before the college football playoff committee comes in and, drops the first rankings and, everybody pulls out their hair, jumps to conclusions, even though there's going to be a lot of football left. But it's going to be interesting how this whole thing shakes out in the next couple of weeks. All right, we're going to go to break, and after that, we're going to break down a couple of NFL games. Not even a couple of NFL games. We're going to talk about how Tom Brady, how a couple of the old guard is falling off a cliff, to say the least. We'll be back after break. Thank you. All right, welcome back to the final segment of episode 1. Thanks for listening through. Let's get into the NFL. Let's talk about the men's league. Okay, obviously KC and Buffalo was the headline. I know it wasn't Sunday Night Football. Dallas, Jerry's gonna pull his strings. Always get to be Sunday Night Football. Big money Jerry. But KC and Buffalo is essentially what mostly everybody will say is going to be the AFC Championship game coming this season. And with that being said, it didn't disappoint us at all. It was edge of your seat the whole game. You had big plays from Diggs, Davis again. Had big plays from Trav, because Trav is always going to get his own. But, kind of an unsung hero, kind of a surpriser. Both teams had great. Their run game was good. It was solid for the first time in probably a while. Singletary gets it going, because you don't usually see the Buffalo Bills, having a run game aside from Josh Allen, which is going to be very, very, very needed down the stretch. You can't just run your quarterback at the end of games. It's how you lose that's how you lose. That's how you lose your guy going down the stretch, taking all these extra hits. KC was looking good with the rookie. He had 2 rushes for about, I want to say, 15 yards. And Clyde Edwards-Helaire didn't look too bad either. 9 rushes for 33 yards, but, not really a volume guy. But this game was lost in turnovers. Buffalo comes out, turnover early, first drive. Not a good thing at all. And then you have, Patrick Mahomes, not to be outdone, he has his own turnover. Just throws I would call an effort ball, just throws it up, interception. Bills get the ball back. And the game wasn't as high scoring as I personally thought. I'm not going to say I'm above it. I'm not going to lie to you guys in the first episode. But, the game, the over-under was at 53.5. Everybody thought it was like, oh, it's going to be this high-scoring game just like in the playoffs. No, it really wasn't. It was more about being methodical, getting down the field, because neither team wanted to let that knockout punch happen. Like last season, Kansas City doesn't have Ty Hill anymore, but they still have guys who can get down the field. Juju had a pretty solid game, and you have Valdez-Scantling, who can take the top off any defense, with his speed. And then, obviously, for Buffalo, they have Gabriel Davis, who we all saw take the top off of the Steelers. 98-yard touchdown, a couple big touchdowns last week. And you have Diggs, having a big game against KC for the first time in a couple games. Neither side really wanted to let the knockout blow happen, but it all came down to the turnovers. You have Patrick Mahomes with the ball with 2 minutes left. With essentially 2 minutes left with 2 timeouts. Everybody in the world is going to say, oh, yeah, Patrick, that's way more than enough time for Patrick Mahomes. But it's kind of that it's a double-edged sword. He likes to run around. Patrick likes to run around, trying to make plays. But sometimes you just got to live to fight another day. And he didn't do that yesterday. He throws a costly turnover at the end of the game to lose, essentially clinch the loss for Kansas City. Second time in both their losses that he's had the game sealed on an interception that he's thrown, which was, I wouldn't say, this wasn't a good ball. It wasn't a good decision by Patrick. You're 4 years in, and it's like at some point you have to stop making that same mistake. But hats off to Buffalo, Josh Allen, getting over the hurdle back-to-back years in regular season. And now, essentially, the AFC is running through Buffalo. And we all know how weather in Buffalo is. Yeah, they're grown men, and weather shouldn't matter. But weather's going to matter. When you're playing in Buffalo with 20-mile-per-hour winds, ask Mac Jones. Ask him how hard it is to throw in Buffalo, because you can't simulate that. You can't simulate having 20 miles per hour winds. Bills Mafia trying to take your head off from the stands, kind of like how the Philadelphia Eagles fans are. And then you have the rigid cold that's coming off the lake, right across from Niagara Falls, right across from Canada. It's cold as heck up there. So Buffalo finally being able to have this game, the AFC Championship game, essentially at home, which is going to probably more than likely be at home, it's going to be a big, 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 big plus for their side, especially with them probably having a first-round bye, trying to get fresh, where Kansas City's probably going to have to play, if I were to bet my own money, they're probably going to have to play against Miami second round before they even get to play Buffalo. Miami's offense is looking great, kind of reminiscent of their own offense from previous years. You have Ty Hill and Waddle. But, they haven't looked too good the last couple of weeks, but That's without the starting quarterback in Tua Tagovailoa, who's going to be back this week, which is going to change a lot of things. So with all things being that, Buffalo looks like as good as advertised, best team in the AFC. I wouldn't say they're the best team I would say that they're the best team in the NFL right now, but with the Eagles being undefeated, winning another game last night, despite looking not too good in the second half, they have the right to be called the best team in the league right now. Undefeated. Nothing matters more than wins and losses in this league. So with them not losing a game, Eagles have to be the number one. But if we're talking about strictly the eye test, Buffalo's by far the best team in the NFL right now. So to carry on about the NFL, the great thing about the NFL, I would say, is there's so much turnover every season. There's young guys who can come in and make instant impact in the league. You know, unlike in the NBA where the same guys have been the best guys for about 5-10 years. You know, you have LeBron, Kevin Durant, you know, Steph Curry, who's been the top three of the best five players for like the last 6-7 years at the least. You know, but in the NFL, you don't really see that aside from the quarterback position where you have Tom Brady, Aaron Rodgers, who essentially have always been top five guys regardless for the last 10 years. But recently, they went to Mount Everest and fell off a cliff. Like, it has been bad for the old guard, let's say, to put it mildly. You know, you have Brady, who missed the whole offseason practically. The Bucs just don't look like the Bucs can't move the ball on offense aside from Leonard Fournette, who got it going yesterday. But if I were to tell you guys that, yeah, the Steelers are going to miss their three starting corners, you know, and then you're missing their two best defensive players overall with Minkah Fitzpatrick, who's a top 1-2 guy at safety, and then you're also missing TJ Watt. You would say that the Buccaneers are going to beat the brakes off of them. You know, 10-point spread, even Vegas thought it was going to be another bloodbath because what the Buffalo Bills just did last week, you would think that the Steelers had no chance. And they go out there and win because the Buccaneers cannot move the ball. Their defense is carrying them. You know, we saw week 1 against the Cowboys. You're like, oh, okay, so week 1, Brady's going to get together. They almost lose to the Falcons. You know, they kind of get saved, you know, by a phantom roughing the passer call on Jared from the Falcons. But they don't really move the ball against the Packers. But you can say, oh, they don't have Julio. They didn't have Mike Evans. They didn't have Godwin that game. Okay, I'll give you that. Here's a pass. Buccaneers haven't looked good. Can't move the ball. But it is not just a Tom Brady thing. You know, he's 47. He had to fall off eventually. Like J. Cole said, it's a fall off. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers with probably one of the worst receiving corps in the NFL right now. He can't move the ball either. We saw it last week against the Giants. We saw it against the Vikings week 1. They can't move the ball. And then coming into this week, he can't find it. Like, yeah, Aaron Rodgers is always going to have a high passing percentage because he's always going to take the smart pass. But he can't move the ball. He can't get the ball to the end zone. He doesn't have Devontae Adams, you know, the security blanket like he usually does. You know, I know he's probably begging Odell Beckham every night on the phone, praying that he comes to Green Bay, Wisconsin, you know, to try and essentially save the season because as of right now, the way that the NFC East is looking, they're going to get 2 teams into the playoffs easily. And then with the way that the NFC West is, which we'll get more into that in a couple of minutes, the NFC West is going to probably get 2 teams. So it's kind of looking like the Packers are going to be left with their hands up asking, like, where's mine? Because the Giants already have a lead on them, have a 2-game lead on them now because they have the tiebreaker. The Cowboys look good. They're going to get Dak back, and, you know, essentially, they'll probably probably finish the season about 13 or 14 wins, 12, 13 wins. And then I know the Niners haven't looked too good, but they're going to pick it up. I believe in them. Kyle Shanahan always finds a way. But he hasn't looked good. Aaron Rodgers hasn't really got the job done. He's not the same Aaron Rodgers. But then there's two other guys. There's two other guys who have looked abysmal, horrible. Worst two quarterbacks in the league. You would say, oh, Daniel Jones-esque. No. Matthew Stafford is playing like the Matthew Stafford that Richard Sherman has said he's been the last couple years. Matthew Stafford throws a pick six yesterday to make the Rams go down. Matt Stafford has thrown picks his whole career. And Detroit is okay. It's okay. He's in Detroit. He's okay. It doesn't matter. It's not his fault. It's Detroit's fault. He's playing with a bad O-line. Oh, my God. Last year, we kind of, turned a blind eye to it because they won a Super Bowl. But he led the NFL in interceptions. And as of right now, he's leading the league in interceptions again. And if it was Jameis Winston, you would all be including myself, we would all be calling for his job. Matthew Stafford just cannot keep the ball in the Rams' hands. If it's not going to Cooper Kupp, there's a 50-50 chance that the ball is going to get thrown to the other team. And that's just not okay. That's just not all right for a team with that many weapons on the outside. You have Allen Robinson, who finally is getting love these last couple weeks. And we have, essentially, it's a big drop-off, but you have Van Jefferson, you have Cooper Kupp and Allen Robinson. You shouldn't be throwing as many interceptions as you throw. Last week, he plays pretty bad. Not going to say pretty bad. He played bad against the Cowboys, where Micah Parsons wanted to win the Defensive Player of the Year all in one game. But I don't really see his help on the way. Is Odell going to come back? With all the, you have a lot of talk about the Rams not really offering Odell the contract that he wanted because he helped you win a Super Bowl. Odell was on pace to win Super Bowl MVP. I don't care what anybody says. He was on pace to win Super Bowl MVP. And you don't offer him a contract, and now it's looking like you need him a lot because Matt Stafford is just out there throwing at anybody. And last but certainly not least, my guy, Mr. Unlimited, Russell Wilson, hasn't looked good a single game this season. Every game, he's had over 200 yards. Diddly do. Of course you're going to have over 200 yards. It's the NFL in 2022. It's geared towards you having 200 plus yards because, fans want to see passing, all this other fun stuff. But you can't look as bad as Russell has. Came out last week that he's been facing a shoulder injury that played Dak last season, all season in training camp. But there's no excuse. You have Cortland Sutton, who's probably a top 15, 20 guy. You have Jerry Jeudy, who's a top 20 guy, top 20 to 25 guy at the least. And you have KJ Hamler, who's a pretty solid receiver. And Tim Patrick, I'm not for sure if Tim Patrick's been hurt this season, but you have no excuse not to produce when you have that type of receiving talent. I know Monday Night Football's tonight, as of recording this, he hasn't played his week six game. Saying that I'm kind of a jinx, watch him go out there and blaze the world on fire with 300 yards and 4 touchdowns in spite of me. But the old guard is just simply being, we're seeing it in real time, them just slowly trickle off and looking like it's time to retire. We saw Brady little pump fake with a retirement last all season, but he didn't actually pull the trigger. He came back. Aaron, kind of hinted at it a little bit, saying he'll retire. But Matt and Russ, no talks about retirement. Just got both of them, 3 of the 4 of them, Rodgers, Stafford, and Russ all got new contracts this offseason. So what's the issue right now? You have to be able to, you're a top paid quarterback, you have to be able to move the ball, you have to be able to win games, and you got to be able to shoulder blame, unlike Aaron Rodgers, who's blamed basically everyone but himself. But that's just the type of guy that he is. All right, that's all for episode 1 of Through the Whistle. Thank you to Ashley and AB Designs for the merch, able to represent them. Nice little company from Columbus, Ohio. I'll be back tomorrow to talk more about the NBA, talk about NBA opening night. Got a lot to unpack with that. And, my predictions for the upcoming season NBA-wise. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Ty, and I'll see you guys real soon.